The chamber was silent, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that comes right before a storm hits. Tension hung in the air like static, thick, invisible, and waiting to snap. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Cameras hummed. Staffers clutched their tablets like shields. This wasn't just a congressional hearing. This was war. At the center sat Congressman Jim Jordan, gripping the gavel like a weapon, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched. His eyes scanned the room, not for allies, but for opposition. Then, with one thunderous strike, he brought the gavel down. "We are living in a digital dictatorship," he declared, his voice sharp, raw, and full of righteous fury. "Americans are being silenced, not by bullets or bars, but by algorithms and filters." Gasps, murmurs. Behind him, a poster showed a blacked-out tweet with a red circle around it. "Censorship," it read. And suddenly, the room wasn't just tense, it was electrified. 11 million people. That's how many were watching, live. Not on delay, not in recap. Live, C-SPAN, MSNBC, Fox, YouTube. Across the country, living rooms flickered with the same image. Congressman Jim Jordan in full attack mode, shouting about censorship, waving redacted tweets like evidence from a crime scene. In the press gallery, reporters were scribbling frantically, typing so fast their fingers blurred. Cameras moved like hunters, locking in, zooming close. But none of them saw her. Jasmine Crockett, sitting still, a single hand resting on a red leather folder. Her eyes steady, her breath calm, her presence unnervingly quiet. She wasn't speaking. She wasn't even blinking. But she was watching. And that, somehow, felt more dangerous than all of Jordan's shouting. Because while he was lighting a fire for the cameras, she was sitting in the smoke, already knowing where the fire would burn next. Jim Jordan stood, not as a legislator, but as a man on a mission. His right hand gripped a thick stack of papers, and with the confidence of someone who believed he owned the room, he raised them high over his head. "Here," he shouted, "is proof. Documented, time-stamped, undeniable proof." One by one, he began to toss the pages on the desk like grenades. YouTube removed this video of a decorated veteran simply for questioning the 2020 election. Slam. Next. Twitter flagged this post about vaccine side effects within 12 minutes. No explanation. Just gone. Slam. Another. Meta deleted this live stream of a town hall meeting labeled as dangerous speech. He didn't just read the examples. He threw them down like charges in a courtroom, each one sharper, more dramatic, his voice rising like thunder over a battlefield. This isn't moderation. This is manipulation. This isn't protecting users. This is controlling thought. This isn't democracy. This is digital tyranny. His voice cracked like a whip. His words cut like a blade. And for a moment, it felt like the chamber had turned into a courtroom, with Jordan as judge, jury, and executioner of Silicon Valley. The camera shifted. After minutes of fire and fury from Jim Jordan, the lens drifted, slowly, deliberately, and found her, Jasmine Crockett, still, silent, composed. One hand rested gently on the red leather folder in front of her, not clutched, not shaken, just there, like a fuse lying in plain sight. Her gaze didn't flicker. Her shoulders didn't move. She wasn't defending. She wasn't reacting. She was waiting, not with fear, not with anger, but with calculation. Like someone who knows that when the room thinks it's in control, she's already counted every beat, every breath, and is just waiting for the rhythm to break. Because Jasmine Crockett didn't come to raise her voice. She came to detonate the truth, precisely on her terms. Jim Jordan leaned forward again. This time, slower. He wasn't yelling now. He was cutting. "Let me make this perfectly clear," he said, holding up a thick folder labeled Confidential. "Today, I'm calling for an emergency subpoena of every internal file. From Meta, from Google, from Twitter. We want the emails. We want the moderation logs. We want the Slack messages, the meeting notes, the raw code. All of it." His voice didn't rise. It dropped. Low, controlled, icy. "We are done being silenced. We are done with excuses. This ends now." The chamber fell still. Not one member spoke. Not one aide moved. Even the press stopped typing. And still, Jasmine Crockett said nothing. She sat, back straight, eyes locked on Jordan, breathing steady. Her hands didn't twitch. Her lips didn't part. But her silence screamed louder than any gavel ever could. Because the man across from her had just declared war, and she was still waiting to choose exactly where to strike. Jasmine Crockett moved, but just barely. No dramatic gesture, no slamming of fists, just the subtle click of a red leather folder opening. Inside, color printouts, leaked emails, internal memos, data logs with unfiltered annotations, receipts, all of them. The kind no one expected her to have. She didn't stand. She didn't raise her voice. She simply spoke. Low, steady, surgical. "Congressman Jordan," she said, "on February 9th, 2022, your office requested that Twitter reassess visibility of 3 accounts." She slid one page forward. Big red circle. Email headers. The CC line included a senior staffer in Jordan's team. One of those accounts was flagged, not for violence, not for misinformation, but for calling you out. A murmur ran through the room. She turned another page. "And here, April 3rd, your staff contacted Meta asking why a post mocking your leadership hadn't been removed faster." She let that sink in. "You didn't fight censorship, Mr. Jordan. You weaponized it, behind closed doors. And now, you're here crying foul because the game stopped favoring you." Silence, complete. And then, gasps. One reporter stopped writing mid-sentence. Aide's hand froze halfway to a water bottle. Even the camera operators leaned in a little too far. Jasmine never blinked. She just looked up, eyes clear, tone unchanged. "You wanted proof. Now you have it." The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. Jim Jordan, moments ago the roaring voice of censorship outrage, was now quiet, still holding his folder, but no longer throwing pages, no longer preaching, because Jasmine Crockett was doing what no one in that room expected, turning his own fire back on him. She slid another document across the table, its timestamp bold, its subject line blunt. Subject: request to review public posts for potential disinformation. Date: March 12th. Sender: jordan.house.gov. Jasmine didn't look up. She let the paper speak. Then she spoke. Soft, steady. "Congressman, this email came from your office. It asked a senior Twitter employee to flag 5 accounts. Not for hate speech, not for threats, but because, quote, they undermine confidence in your public statements." She let that phrase hang in the air. She slid the next page. "And this one, from your deputy chief of staff, specifically asked Meta to remove a meme that had gone viral because it was, quote, damaging to narrative discipline." "Narrative discipline," she repeated, letting the irony drip. People were shifting in their seats. A few murmurs, some nervous laughs, a hush of disbelief. "Mr. Jordan, you weren't censored. You were curating. You weren't silenced. You were sculpting the silence, choosing what stayed and what got buried." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Nothing came out. Jim Jordan's jaw was tight, but his voice was gone. No rebuttal, no righteous monologue, no fire, just silence, and a face that looked like it had just felt the walls close in. His eyes darted, scanning his staff, searching for a line, a defense, but all he found were blank stares and panic behind glasses. He reached for the mic, but instead of responding, he muttered, almost too low for the camera to catch, "We'll take a recess." A producer in the back whispered, "Still rolling," and the cameras kept filming. Reporters looked up. Aides leaned closer. The gallery shifted. Then came the whispers, small, hushed, dangerous. Did she just prove he was the censor all along? The question didn't come from a journalist. It came from a fellow congressman, someone on Jordan's side of the aisle. And the weight of that whisper hit harder than any headline. Because it wasn't just Crockett who saw it. The room saw it. The nation saw it. The warrior for free speech had been editing the truth. Jasmine Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She leaned in and pulled the curtain back even further. "This isn't new," she said, her voice low, not cold, but full of memory. "This isn't about one tweet, or one hearing, or one viral moment. This is a pattern, and I've lived it." She tapped the table once. "Let's roll the clip." The chamber darkened just slightly as a screen came to life behind the committee seats. Muted light flickered as the footage began. 5 hearings, different dates, different topics, but the same voice, interrupting, cutting off, dismissing. "I yield." "Excuse me, can I finish?" "Madam Chair, I wasn't done." Jasmine didn't look at the screen. She didn't need to. She had memorized every frame. On screen, 5 black congresswomen, interrupted, talked over, silenced, and the same man in every frame, Jim Jordan. She finally looked at him. "You didn't just weaponize censorship with big tech. You practiced it here, in these very halls. You turned control into instinct, and you called it order." Not a word in response, just eyes flicking between screen and floor, because now, even his silence looked familiar. Jasmine paused, not to catch her breath, but to let everyone else catch theirs. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't point fingers, but the silence begged to be broken. And when she spoke, it wasn't an accusation, it was a question, but it struck harder than anything that came before. "Why is it," she said slowly, "that truth becomes too aggressive only when it's coming from people like me?" The room froze. No one looked at her. Everyone looked inward, because it wasn't rhetorical, it was personal, it was generational. And for one woman in the public gallery, a white woman in her 60s, it was too much. She covered her mouth and cried. Not because Jasmine was cruel, but because the truth finally broke through the walls she had built to feel comfortable. And Jasmine, she just stood there, still, not triumphant, just present. Because sometimes a single question carries the weight of centuries. Jasmine didn't lean forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't wave papers or slam the table. She just spoke. And somehow, that made every word land harder. "I'm not here to scream," she said, her tone almost gentle. "I'm here to expose what you've buried under years of rehearsed outrage." There were no interruptions, no rebuttals, just air, heavy and still. And it was that calm, that soft, unshaken delivery, that turned her words into steel. She didn't perform. She didn't play to the cameras. She told the truth, without apology. And for the first time that day, no one at the table knew what to say. Because the noise was over, and all that remained was clarity. The room didn't explode. It collapsed, in silence. Jim Jordan pushed back his chair, stood up, didn't say a word, didn't wait for recess, just left. The cameras followed, slow pan, deliberate, like a funeral procession for a reputation that had just been buried. By the truth. In the gallery, someone raised their phone. Not a journalist, just a visitor. They caught it, every second. The walkout, the silence, the tension. By the time Jasmine turned her head slightly, the phone was already uploading. 6 hours later, that 37-second clip had 18 million views. Twitter melted. YouTube choked. TikTok stitched it 200,000 times. And the caption under the video said simply, "She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She didn't chase. He just got up and ran." The next 24 hours didn't feel real. Capitol Hill shook. Not physically, but politically, emotionally, culturally. What began as a tech hearing had now morphed into something far bigger. A reckoning. Cable news went into overdrive. Fox News called Jasmine Crockett radical, reckless, emotional. CNN called her sharp, unshakable, necessary. MSNBC simply called her the mirror. TikTok? They made her iconic. Clips of her calm takedown flooded the app. Side-by-sides with Jordan's silence. Teens were quoting her. Veterans were defending her. And suburban moms were saying they'd never cried watching C-SPAN. Until now. And then came the hashtag, #the Jasmine moment. It hit #1 in under 3 hours. And it stayed there for 3 days straight. Not because she screamed, not because she shocked, but because she refused to shrink. When the room tried to silence her. The next night, no cameras, no hearings, no political stage. Just one desk lamp, a red folder in the background, and Jasmine Crockett, live on her personal stream, with 1.2 million people watching. Her voice wasn't loud. It never needed to be. "I wasn't angry," she began. "I was just tired of the silence." She paused. You could hear the hum of the room. You could feel the weight of that sentence. For years, we've been told to pick our battles, to wait for better moments, to not seem too much. But sometimes, silence isn't patience. It's permission. A tear welled in her eye, but she didn't let it fall. Yesterday wasn't about politics. It was about reminding people that truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits. And when the time comes, it walks into the room and stays. She ended the stream with no applause, no music, just one final line, spoken like a vow. We're not loud because we're angry. We're loud because we're finally being heard. Sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one that dares to speak calmly when truth is inconvenient. Jasmine Crockett reminded us all that silence is never neutral. When we stay quiet in the face of injustice, we become part of the problem. But when we choose to rise, speak, and stand firm with facts, even in the face of rage, that's when change begins. So if you ever feel small, outnumbered, or unheard, remember, you don't need to shout to shake the room. You just need to speak what's true, and speak it without fear. If this story moved you, if you believe that truth deserves a voice, then don't just scroll. Subscribe to AZ Exposed, hit the bell, so you never miss a story that challenges power and defends the voices that matter. Because silence isn't safe. And stories like this, they deserve to be heard.